The air was thick with tension as my mother-in-law's sharp voice cut through the chatter, her eyes blazing with fury. Before I could even process her words, my cruel mother-in-law slapped my daughter on the cheek so hard that the sound echoed in the hallway. My innocent daughter stumbled back, her face red and tears streaming down as she clutched her father's pendant around her neck. My heart raced, a mix of fury and disbelief paralyzing me for a split second. I couldn't understand what had just happened, or why. But what followed next was even more shocking than the slap itself. Hello, my name is Savannah, and I'm 32 years old. I live with my 12-year-old daughter, Isabella, in a quiet suburb of Lincoln. 2 years ago, my husband passed away in a car accident, and since then, it has been just the two of us. Life hasn't been easy, but we've managed to build a small, peaceful world for ourselves. This Sunday morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for Isabella. The warm aroma of toasted bread filled the air, and the comforting sound of the coffee maker bubbled in the background. I set a plate of scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, and warm croissants on the table. Just as I finished arranging everything, Isabella came running down the stairs with excitement. "Mom, look," she exclaimed, holding a bright pink flyer. It was for her upcoming ballet recital, Sleeping Beauty. The flyer featured golden lettering and silhouettes of ballerinas. "Isabella, don't run on the stairs," I said gently, stroking her head. "But I'm so happy for you. Your dad would have been so proud." For a brief moment, sadness clouded her face, but she quickly brightened up. Our Sunday breakfasts had become a sacred ritual, a small piece of joy in our simple life. I work as a freelance writer, earning about $75,000 a year, which is enough to support Isabella and her ballet lessons. We don't live extravagantly, but we are happy. Just as we were finishing breakfast, I received a text message, a reminder about my sister Scarlett's wedding. It was set to be a grand affair at the lavish Fairmont Hotel in Charleston. Meanwhile, in a sprawling mansion in Charleston's upscale neighborhood, Scarlett, my younger sister, was busy with the final preparations for her wedding. Scarlett had always lived a life of luxury, thanks to my mother, Diana. After my father passed away years ago, Diana became obsessed with maintaining our family's reputation. Scarlett, now 27, thrived in this environment. Diana's booming voice echoed through the mansion. "Scarlett, the flowers need to be perfect for tomorrow. This wedding is the event of the season." Scarlett, lounging on a designer sofa in her silk robe, responded without looking up from her phone, "Yes, mother. Just make sure everything looks flawless. This day is all about appearances." Scarlett worked as a lifestyle blogger, but her income barely covered her designer handbags. She relied heavily on Diana for financial support. Scarlett's fiancé, Nathan, was a senior vice president at a tech firm, earning an impressive income. The marriage was as much about elevating the family's social standing as it was about love, or so Diana believed. The wedding was set to be a $2.5 million extravaganza at the Fairmont, complete with a $75,000 wedding dress, an exclusive guest list of 800 people, and a menu that included truffle-stuffed lobster and imported champagne. Diana had spared no expense, convinced that this wedding would cement Scarlett's place in Charleston's elite social circle. But, for reasons I didn't quite understand, Scarlett had insisted that Isabella and I attend, even though our relationship had been distant for years. We had been invited, though we were seated at the very back, as if to hide the parts of Diana's life that didn't align with her perfect image. "Mom, do we really have to go to this wedding?" Isabella asked, her voice tinged with reluctance. "Yes, sweetheart. It's family," I replied, trying to hide my own hesitation. "But no matter how people treat us, we'll show up with grace and dignity." Later that afternoon, I packed a simple blue dress for Isabella and a modest black dress for myself. Both were far from the designer ensembles that would flood the event, but they were the best we could afford. The next day, we arrived at the Fairmont through the back entrance as instructed, unnoticed by the glamorous crowd entering through the grand entrance. The opulence of the venue was overwhelming: massive crystal chandeliers, white rose arches, and a sea of perfectly dressed guests. Isabella clung to my hand, her eyes wide with awe. Our seats were at the very back row, barely visible in the grand hall. I felt a pang of humiliation, but I kept my smile for Isabella's sake. As the pipe organ played the wedding march and Scarlett walked down the aisle in her glittering gown, I reminded myself why we were here, to show up for family, no matter what. But deep down, I knew that Scarlett and Diana didn't see us as family. We were merely the forgotten relatives, out of place in their carefully curated world. The wedding ceremony proceeded with all the grandeur one would expect from a $2.5 million event. Scarlett looked radiant in her $75,000 gown, designed by a world-renowned designer, shimmering with hand-sewn crystals. Nathan stood proudly beside her, the perfect image of a successful groom. The guests applauded and teared up as they exchanged vows under a lavish arch of imported white roses. Isabella watched the entire ceremony with wide eyes, clutching her little pearl necklace, a keepsake from her late father. I tried to focus on her excitement instead of the subtle glances from guests who likely wondered why we were there. Once the ceremony concluded, everyone was ushered into the grand reception hall. The space was dripping with opulence, chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, tables adorned with extravagant floral arrangements, and the aroma of gourmet dishes prepared by Michelin-starred chefs. "Mom, I need to use the restroom," Isabella whispered to me as we sat at our table in the far corner. "All right, sweetheart. Be careful and come right back," I said, watching her as she gracefully walked toward the hallway. As I waited for her to return, I sipped water and tried to ignore the growing feeling of unease. Scarlett and Diana were at the head table, basking in the attention of Charleston's elite. The way Diana smiled and gestured as though she owned the world made me feel invisible in comparison. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp, raised voice shattered the polite hum of conversation in the hall. "This child." I turned instantly and saw Diana standing in the hallway, her face twisted with anger. Isabella stood frozen in front of her, looking terrified. Before I could react, Diana raised her hand and slapped Isabella across the face with enough force to make her stagger. The sound echoed through the hallway, silencing the chatter around us. "You ruined the dress!" Diana screamed, her voice laced with venom. The guests turned to watch the commotion. Isabella's cheek was already swollen, and tears filled her eyes. "I didn't do anything," Isabella stammered, her small hands trembling as she clutched the pearl necklace around her neck. I bolted from my seat, my heart pounding. "What's going on here?" I demanded as I rushed to Isabella's side, wrapping my arms around her protectively. "This girl spilled wine on Scarlett's wedding dress," Diana yelled, pointing at Isabella. Scarlett had joined her by now, her dress stained with red wine. "That dress costs $75,000. We'll demand compensation," Nathan added, his voice cold and calculated. I glanced at the dress. The wine stain was large and conspicuous, but I knew Isabella wouldn't do something like that. She was far too careful, especially in a setting like this. "She didn't do it," I said firmly, holding Isabella close. "My daughter would never do something like this." Diana scoffed, her expression full of disdain. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm saying we should check the security footage," I shot back. At that, a flicker of panic crossed Diana's face, but she quickly masked it. "That won't be necessary," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "Oh, it's very necessary," I replied, my voice unwavering. "If you're so certain my daughter is guilty, let's prove it." The guests murmured amongst themselves, and tension filled the air as the hotel's head of security, a man named Michael Collins, stepped forward. "Let's resolve this matter properly," he said calmly. "We'll review the footage." Diana's confident demeanor began to crumble as we were escorted to the security room. The security room at the Fairmont Hotel was dimly lit, with rows of monitors displaying every corner of the lavish venue. Michael Collins, the head of security, calmly seated himself in front of the monitors and began pulling up the footage of the hallway where the incident had occurred. I stood with Isabella by my side, holding her close. Her cheek was still red and swollen from Diana's slap, and I could feel her trembling against me. "Diana, Scarlett, and Nathan stood on the other side of the room, their earlier confidence replaced with visible unease. "Show us the footage," I said, my voice firm but quiet. Michael fast-forwarded through the hallway camera feed until Isabella's figure appeared on the screen. She was walking quietly toward the bathroom, her posture graceful, as always, thanks to her ballet training. My heart ached seeing her innocence so clearly on display. The footage continued, and 2 minutes later, Scarlett and Nathan entered the hallway. Nathan was holding a small bottle in his hand. He uncapped it, and with a quick motion, he poured its contents onto Scarlett's dress. The entire room froze as the footage showed Scarlett gasping theatrically and pretending to examine the stain. Just as planned, Diana suddenly appeared and stormed toward the hallway. The video clearly showed her spotting Isabella, who was just walking back from the bathroom. Without hesitation, Diana raised her hand and slapped Isabella hard across the face. "This is clear evidence," Michael said, his voice calm but authoritative. A hush fell over the room. Diana's face drained of color. Scarlett looked pale and on the verge of tears, while Nathan clenched his fists in frustration. "The footage must be tampered with," Nathan stammered, trying to recover. Michael shook his head. "Our security system is equipped with anti-tampering measures. All footage is time-stamped and digitally verified. There's no doubt this is authentic." I turned to Diana, my anger barely contained. "You slapped my child, framed her for something she didn't do, and humiliated her in front of everyone. And for what? To protect your precious dress." Diana avoided my gaze, her usual arrogance shattered. Scarlett started sobbing quietly, while Nathan stood frozen, clearly realizing the plan had backfired. "We need to call the police," Michael said, breaking the silence. "No, wait," Diana pleaded, her voice trembling. "We can resolve this privately. I'll pay for the damage. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't involve the authorities." But I wasn't having it. "You think you can buy your way out of this?" I snapped. "You tried to destroy my daughter's dignity to save your own pride. That's not something money can fix." Michael nodded at my words. "This incident goes beyond a simple misunderstanding. It's a matter of fraud and assault." Hotel staff quickly secured the exits to prevent anyone from leaving. The murmur of guests outside grew louder as the commotion spread. Within minutes, police officers arrived, and Diana, Scarlett, and Nathan were taken aside for questioning. Isabella clung to me, still shaking but beginning to calm down. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom," she whispered, her voice small. "I know, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "And now everyone else knows too." As the police began reviewing the evidence, the truth about Diana's financial troubles came to light. Scarlett's wedding, the $75,000 dress, and even the luxurious decorations were all part of a grand plan to commit insurance fraud. The wine stain was supposed to justify a fraudulent claim that would have paid for their lavish lifestyle. The enormity of their scheme began to unravel, and I held Isabella close, grateful that her innocence had been proven. As the police investigation continued, more shocking details came to light. Diana's once grand empire was crumbling under a mountain of debt. Scarlett's $2.5 million wedding was part of a desperate plan to maintain their illusion of wealth and social status. Even Nathan, who had seemed like a successful tech executive, was involved in fraudulent activities within his company. The police reviewed additional evidence, including emails and text messages, revealing that Diana, Scarlett, and Nathan had meticulously planned the scheme weeks in advance. Their intention was to file an insurance claim, blaming the damaged wedding dress, which they had stained themselves, for the exorbitant wedding costs. The betrayal stung, but not as much as seeing how willing they were to harm Isabella in the process. She was just a child, and they had tried to sacrifice her innocence to cover up their lies. "Mom, why would they do this to me?" Isabella whispered, her voice trembling. I knelt to her level, holding her shoulders gently. "Sometimes, people let their greed and desperation take over, sweetheart. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." The lead detective, a tall woman named Detective Harris, approached us. Her expression was kind yet professional. "Ms. Bennett, We've reviewed the security footage and collected enough evidence to proceed with charges. Your daughter's innocence is clear. We'll make sure justice is served. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Thank you, Detective. I just want my daughter to feel safe again. As the investigation unfolded, the guests who had once admired Diana's wealth and social influence began to distance themselves. News of the scandal spread quickly, and the once celebrated wedding became the talk of Charleston for all the wrong reasons. 3 hours later, Diana, Scarlett, and Nathan were officially arrested for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and assault. The wedding was abruptly canceled, and the grand reception hall, once filled with opulence, now stood eerily quiet as guests trickled out in disbelief. Before we left the hotel, Detective Harris approached us again. Ms. Bennett, there's another matter I'd like to discuss with you. We've uncovered fraudulent activities in Nathan's company, and Diana's estate is bankrupt. They're going to face serious legal consequences for this. I nodded, still processing everything. Thank you for ensuring the truth comes out. As Isabella and I walked out of the Grand Hotel into the quiet evening, she held my hand tightly. The cool spring breeze brushed against us as we left behind the chaos and deceit of the day. Mom, do you think they'll ever change? Isabella asked softly. I sighed, glancing at her. I don't know, sweetheart. But what matters is that we're stronger because we stood up for the truth. That's what your dad would have wanted. We headed home, our small house in Lincoln feeling like a sanctuary after the drama. I held Isabella close that night, vowing to protect her from anything that could hurt her again. 3 weeks later, the Charleston County Courthouse was packed as the trial of Diana, Scarlett, and Nathan began. The once celebrated socialites were now defendants in a high-profile case of fraud and assault. Isabella and I sat quietly in the gallery, awaiting the proceedings. I held her hand, hoping to give her strength. The prosecutor, a sharp and composed woman named Amanda Reese, presented the case with precision. This is not just a case of attempted insurance fraud, she began, her voice resonating through the courtroom. This is a case of inhumane actions, a mother and daughter orchestrating a scheme so desperate that they resorted to framing an innocent 12-year-old child. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, text messages, and financial records laid bare the intricate plot. Scarlett and Nathan's staged wine stain, Diana's assault on Isabella, and their intent to use insurance money to cover the wedding's $2.5 million cost were all meticulously detailed. Diana sat stoically, her usual air of arrogance replaced with a forced composure. Scarlett, however, was visibly distressed, while Nathan fidgeted uncomfortably, unable to meet anyone's gaze. When it was time for Isabella to testify, my heart sank. I didn't want her to relive the trauma, but her courage amazed me. She stepped up to the witness stand, her voice steady as she recounted what had happened. Mrs. Williams accused me of something I didn't do, she said, her small hands clutching the microphone nervously. She slapped me and said I ruined the dress, but I didn't even touch it. Her words brought tears to my eyes, and I could see several jurors exchanging sympathetic glances. The defense tried to argue that Diana's actions were a momentary lapse in judgment due to the stress of the wedding, but Amanda Reese countered firmly. A lapse in judgment doesn't involve weeks of planning or attempting to destroy the reputation of a child. As the trial continued, shocking revelations emerged. Financial experts testified that Diana's estate was over $20 million in debt, and Nathan's tech firm had lost $12 million due to his fraudulent investments. Scarlett admitted under questioning that she had been complicit in the plan because she feared losing her mother's approval and the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with their verdict. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the sentences. Diana Williams, 8 years in prison and a $4 million fine for fraud, conspiracy, and assault. Nathan Cooper, 10 years in prison and a $6 million fine for fraud and financial crimes. Scarlett Williams, 3 years in prison with 5 years probation, considering her cooperation and remorse. In addition, all three were ordered to pay Isabella compensation for medical expenses and emotional distress. As the verdict was read, I felt an overwhelming sense of justice. Isabella squeezed my hand and I whispered, "It's over now, sweetheart." "You were so brave." The defendants were led away in handcuffs, their once glamorous lives reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. The court's decision sent a clear message: greed and deception would not be tolerated, especially when it came at the expense of an innocent child. After the trial, life slowly began to return to normal for Isabella and me. With the compensation awarded by the court, I was able to pay for Isabella's ballet lessons, cover her future education, and even purchase a modest new home in a peaceful neighborhood outside of Lincoln. Our new house wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect for us. Isabella decorated her room with posters of her favorite ballerinas and arranged her trophies on a shelf by the window. The scars from that dreadful day were healing, both physically and emotionally. A few weeks after moving in, Isabella received news that made her light up with joy. She had been accepted into a prestigious ballet summer program. "Mom, they picked me," she exclaimed, holding the acceptance letter tightly. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I said, hugging her. "Your hard work is paying off." Meanwhile, I focused on building a better future for us. I had left freelance work behind and started a new career as an editor for a local publishing house. The steady income allowed me to provide for Isabella while also pursuing something I loved. One afternoon, Isabella and I sat on a blanket in the park, enjoying a picnic. The sun was warm, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of spring flowers. She looked up at the sky, her face thoughtful. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think Grandma and Aunt Scarlett will ever be okay?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "I hope they'll learn from their mistakes," I said honestly. "But what matters is that we're okay. We've built a life for ourselves, and no one can take that from us." She nodded, a small smile spreading across her face. "I don't hate them anymore," she said. "I just feel sad for them." Tears welled in my eyes at her maturity. Despite everything, Isabella's heart remained kind and forgiving. Diana and Scarlett's lives had changed drastically. In prison, Diana spent her days working in the library, reflecting on the choices that had brought her to this point. The grandeur of her former life was gone, replaced by gray walls and solitude. Scarlett, who had been given probation after serving part of her sentence, started working as a counselor for troubled teens. It was a small step toward redemption, and while we hadn't spoken since the trial, I hoped she would find peace in helping others. Nathan, on the other hand, had shown no remorse. Even behind bars, he continued scheming, writing letters to his former colleagues in a desperate attempt to regain his wealth and power. But no one responded. 2 years later, Isabella starred in her ballet recital, performing a breathtaking rendition of Sleeping Beauty. As I watched her on stage, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. She had overcome so much, yet here she was, shining brighter than ever. After the recital, we celebrated with a small party at home. Her classmates and friends came over, filling the house with laughter and joy. "Mom," Isabella said, showing me her phone, "I want to apply to the Juilliard School. Do you think I can do it?" "Of course you can," I said, hugging her tightly. "Your dad would be so proud of you." As we sat together that evening, I realized how far we had come. The pain of the past had given way to hope, and we had built a life filled with love and resilience. "Mom," Isabella said thoughtfully, "maybe happiness isn't about money or fancy things. Maybe it's just about being with people who love you." I smiled, wiping away a tear. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart." And with that, we looked out at the stars from our little home, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt and captivating stories. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring even more engaging content to you. Thank you for being a part of our journey.